Peace, people. Hotep. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Shalom. Ham and bacon and all that good shit. Kind of what I really want to just talk about. Something. Kind of just spark something. I was just in the gym exercising. You know, sometimes when you're on the, in the gyms on the cardio equipment, they got the TVs going. So, the gym that I go to, they always have on, find some interesting topics. They always have on the Ancient Aliens channel, which I thought, it's an interesting topic. You have to be careful because people get a little space cadet with it. But anyway, this particular show, I think it was called Satan Conspiracy. Something like that, or the Lucifer Conspiracy, right? And it got all these scholars on here. Drink this way. They got all these scholars on there debunking the myths of the religious biblical story and concept of the devil, right? And they're saying all these stories really true with Lucifer, Satan, the devil, whatever title you want to give it. Is the sole purpose? Is the devil some evil being whose job is to torment and destroy all good people in the world, and corrupt humanity, and lead all these people to some fiery place called hell and control them? They were making a mockery and how comical and how it was mythology, right? All these biblical scholars, and then they're giving you archaeologists and researchers are giving you their whole perspective and point out, which I found interesting. Or did this come from the myths that were created about the biblical stories, and not just in the biblical stories, but in other cultures, the myths of Hades? Now, is hell really actually such a place? Is this fiery place you go to if you're not loyal and obedient to this biblical God? Are you going to get tossed into the flames of eternal damnation? And long story short, they came to the conclusion, no, it's all mythology. It's all faith and belief. It's all systematic and structured religion that was given to the masses to keep their minds controlled. Because as I said before, a million times, you hear me say this, and I'll constantly say it over and over. Fear is the number one tool and element that can be used to keep people under a state of control. Okay? And when you can get people to conform and keep them under control, you can get them to do whatever you want. And I want to, again, go a little more in depth on this biblical story. And they were talking about the story in Revelations. They were talking about what it represented when Lucifer was cast out of the heavens and fell from grace, as they term it, via religious indoctrination. And he was cast into the earth, right? But then we see this strange story mentioned in the 6th chapter of Genesis that you've heard me talk about sometimes, that there were giants in the earth, these so-called people in the land of Nod that Cain and Abel came across. And then it says that these giants, or these Nephilim, or these beings, came down from the skies, right? And they had sex with the daughters of men because they were fair to them, and they produced children with them. But it never tells you how those people got to the land of Nod, right? When we do this research. But as I said before, your fall. Now, what I found interesting in this show, they were showing, well, maybe men through the myths have interpreted, based on the mythology, these characteristics, attributes, and stories of what the devil represents, or Satan, or Lucifer. Maybe the devil, and again, I'm quoting from the show, is just a highly intelligent being, a form of extraterrestrial, they were saying, an angel that started, here's the part that got me, the kicker that got me. Maybe he came to the realization and started to think for himself. And maybe humans got it twisted that maybe this person, is he, and then they got into the point, is he really responsible for the evil and destruction on the planet? Or maybe humans and religious people have it twisted, here's the icebreaker, that maybe the very God that they're worshiping and giving all this credence and credit to is responsible for all the evil and destruction on the planet. Now, that is a 100% true statement, because all you got to do is look into the Bible, and as I've talked about this on and off for many years, all you have to do is look in the Bible and see the contradictions, see the bloodshed, see the violence and see the evil that this so-called biblical God condones. But on one token, you got the Torah and the law, right? Which most people only familiar with the 10 Commandments. There's actually 613 commandments. Now, is there a coincidence they focus on the 10, the 6, 1, and 3 equals 10? There is some significance to that. That's dealing with astrology. I'm going to get into that really right now. But the whole point is people focus on the main 10 commandments. All right? Which what? Say, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor, thou shalt not steal. I'm going to focus on those. But those go thrown out the window when God's got an agenda in the Bible, and he condones not only wars, he not only condones his so-called chosen people to go into war and do battle, he also, in those battles, because how many times have we read biblical stories where it says they brought back loot and booty? They took the gold, the riches. We know they also raped and took the women and the children. That just happens in war. We know this. Incest, you see, throughout the Bible. Look at the story of Judah in the book of Genesis when he's traveling and his own daughter deceives him. And first of all, what's Judah doing buying some pussy while he's traveling? He's supposed to be a man of God. That's a whole nother story. But my whole point is, all of these things via religion that religious people are told to not partake in, God gets a free pass. He partakes in it when it's convenient. It's okay to kill, start wars, destroy innocent men, women, and children when it's okay, if God has, if there's a purpose for it, for God. So is it thou shalt not kill except when God says? This stuff is fucking comical and ridiculous. And is the flip side of that, this devil story, this Lucifer story used as a scapegoat. As you know, one of his names is Azazel, the one removed. He's also known as the scapegoat. So who really was the sacrificial lamb in this story? Who really was telling the truth in these biblical stories? Because even when you read the story in the Garden of Eden, the mythological Disney World story that snakes, crawl around in the garden and talk to people, that's not crazy. But people think that what we do on this path is crazy, but that's not crazy. We believe in talking snakes. But the whole point is, the serpent, and I'm speaking in symbolic terms, the way it's conveyed in the religious bullshit. The serpent told Eve to eat or partake of this so-called apple. And her response to him is, oh, we're told we don't eat that. If we do, we will die. And what's his response? You won't surely die. God doesn't want you to eat that because you'll become like him. You'll become like these so-called gods or angels. Now, when they ate it, did they die? If you know the story, you'd have to say no. So who was the liar and the deceiver and the deceptor? It wasn't the serpent. It was obviously God, because God had an agenda, right? And then what did happen? Their eyes did become open up, and they started to become aware of their surroundings. So here we go with the nonsense and the bullshit and the lies that somebody's not telling the story accurately. So we see that didn't happen. And because of this stupidity story, these so-called individuals, Adam and Eve, were cast out of this Garden of Eden. I don't even want to get into that Garden of Eden shit right now. It's a whole nother breakdown in the tree of life and the alphabet, all that bullshit. But the whole point being is, I think we've got the stories twisted. I think the mythology has crept in of this, if you're not obedient, you're going to go to this eternal place of damnation where there's fire burning eternally, you're going to be tortured. If you're a grown-ass adult in 2019 and you still believe that spooky mythology, then there's something wrong with you. There's seriously something wrong with you. Then it talks about, or gets into in the same program that I was just viewing, it talks about maybe this whole concept of the Prince of Darkness. This was another thing that really caught my attention. Maybe this Prince of Darkness concept is trying to show us the reality, ready for this, of our real self. This is on History Channel, people. We know this stuff is out there, exists. But I say this to say, here we are, and we have so-called European scholars, we have religious people. Now, these are so-called people that most conscious people wouldn't label conscious according to their terms and definition. But why is it so easy for them to really dissect this and talk about it and present information and evidence to validate the points. But then you have so-called melanated people, when you hear the term Satan, Lucifer, the devil, they cringe and all types of insecurities and fears creep in because they would have to admit they're indoctrinated by fear and religion. That's why. And they clearly make this is a myth, people. It's not a real story. Stop looking at this devil character as some literal demonic monster being that has control, or it's trying to take control take control of the world and trying to take all people out. What's the purpose when you get there? Then what happens? Right? What happens when you go to this place called heaven, let alone that? What happens? I mean, where does it go from there? You understand? What do we do? It's going to sit around and what? Sing songs, kumbaya, hallelujah. It's all fucking mythology. All to distract you from the fact and the reality of the divine power, who you are. That Lucifer rebellion, as we know in the Quran, in the Arabic, he is referred to as Iblis, the rebellious one. Right? And we're taught from day one that being rebellious is a negative thing. It's bad. It's a bad attribute. It's evil. Because that's been indoctrinated and instilled in us since we were younger children, especially via religions and institutions that you don't question. You don't ask. You don't ever question anything that you read in a quote-unquote holy book. That's the infallible word of God. But as we get mature and as we become adults and we start dissecting this so-called infallible word, we start to see the wide range of inconsistencies that are in this book that make absolutely no fucking sense at all. All right? So the question that remains is, how does one move forward and approach this, or should they look at it? Well, let me not say only say it from that. I only give a shit to talk about it from a left-hand path to self-mastery perspective. I'm not interested in talking about it in any other way. Why do we say left-hand path, right? Which is a term, as I've said recently, I'm not really too crazy with, but I know people can connect with it. Left-hand path is just a term for those who are what we label right-siders or conformists. So when you're saying left-hand path, you're in completely opposition to the mainstream or the norm. Well, that's what the story of Lucifer really represents. There's nowhere in that story or in those biblical accounts where that was the agenda, the way religious doctrine and dogma professes it and passes on. You can't find that recorded anywhere in those stories. You see, because when you read in the Quran the story of why he was cast out of the heavens, because he refused to bow down, as it says, or make obeisance to God, right? And then you had, according to the story, the angel Michael, right, which represents so many different things in different cultures, which means who dares to be like El, right? In the Hebrew, Mikael, right? Who dares to be like God? That's what the name means. He supposedly steps up. And as it says, recorded in Revelation 12, Michael and his angel fought against the dragon and his angels and cast Iblis out of the heavens, right? So it appears on the surface that you have this story that got monstrosized later down in history as this battle between good and evil. Or does this really represent the battle that we fight internally every day, dealing with our willpower? So I want to look at it from a left-hand path perspective. That's exactly what it represents. We are constantly going through this internal battle. You can even use the archetype of Set and Usir, the battle between Set and Usir. You can use the archetype of Cain versus Abel via religion. You can use the archetype of Enki versus Enlil in the Sumerian, the Akkadian, the Babylonian, whatever. It all always goes back and ties to that. The struggle that we fight and battle within ourselves to do the right things in the sense of, and make this clear, that's not a religious statement, to do the right things in the sense for what is pertinent for us, important for us, correct for us, for our personal growth. We always struggle with the eternal battle spiritually, where we're always pressured to conform. If we're raised in a certain religion, tradition, and culture, we'll immediately feel guilt about going against that. Because the feelings of guilt that rise to the surface, well, I was raised this way. I was Latino and I was raised Catholic, or I was African American and I was raised Baptist or Methodist. And to go against that, there's this guilt and this shame. And I know people that have struggled with that when they've left this path, because that guilt and shame goes back to that garden story. That was one of the first stories that they stamped in your subconscious mind of disobedience. That's why I started, and I'm going to take you back to there, because once they put that shit in the very beginning, because that's where it starts, right? The whole stories and the foundation of it is you falling out of grace or being disobedient. And the question is, disobedient to who and what? That's a whole nother story. Okay? So all this shit is done intentionally. And trust me when I tell you, intentionally. Because it instills the shame, the guilt, the fear, the pride, all of those attributes that boil and come to the surface, that was their job. The implant of the fear and all of those things started from that point. So all of these stories represent, now as I said before, and those that have taken my classes, we deal with the esoterical aspect when dealing with these scriptures. And I ain't going to get into all that right now. But when we look at some of the symbolic and metaphorical meanings of what these stories convey, they can be beneficial to you in how you can apply it as an archetype on this path. I keep telling people that. A whole spiritual system, again, can be an archetype. Understand what an archetype is. It's not just a deity that you would associate with in a particular pantheon, such as the Orisha, the Neteru, whatever. It's deeper than that. When you can take these concepts and apply them to your personal path and you grow from it, it has a hidden meaning that speaks to your subconscious. You see this narrative over and over. The internal struggle with willpower. The struggle we face on a daily basis to make the correct conscious decisions for ourselves. And as I mentioned before, it starts from the moment your feet hit the ground and you step out of bed. You are constantly doing internal battle with yourself. Okay, what am I going to wear today? You got to get up. Okay, I got to brush my teeth. What am I going to eat for breakfast this morning? All right, what do I got to get done today? You are constantly battling this internal aspect of yourself constantly. And that's what it means when you hear the term, you'll hear the term, and I've talked about you becoming or being the ritual, right? That's what it means when you're able to work magic on all levels. And that's why last night on the feed which was a great show, by the way, even though we had a little technical difficulties in the beginning, but I think we touched on a lot of topics when dealing with the relationship area. But I was talking about last night at one portion in the show, that's how we got to learn to work magic on an everyday level, because a lot of it is mental. And when I was talking about that last night, a lot of it, you're going to find majority of the consistent work you do on yourself throughout on a daily basis is more mental than anything. Just think about the percentage of work you really do in your chamber room going through elaborate rituals. Now, there should be a percentage of it, because I know there is for myself. And then compare that to the percentage of how much of it you do on a daily basis mentally, and how much of it is internal, how much of it is reflection, visualization, and focus, and all those higher mental faculties that one needs to be successful. That's what these stories are reflecting. It's talking about the internal battle that you deal with on a daily basis. That's it. When you look at it and you try to make it literal, and that's what the religions did with these stories to cause the confusion, is to take these stories and make it as if, this stuff is talking about, something, literal. And in essence, it's really not. It's speaking again of the internal battles, the internal struggles that one goes through on a daily basis. Don't get it twisted. Don't get confused. Make sure you're crystal clear and you understand what perspective these stories are coming from. Because look, one thing I know for many years in dealing with this religious rhetoric shit is the fear factor in this is very deep. It's very traumatic. I've seen it on levels where people have come into this path, and you've heard me talk about this before, but then just go right back to doing the shit they did even harder, because there's a point on this path where you encounter your real self. We can call it the divine, whatever terminology you want to use that makes you feel good. We can call it the divine or whatever. The point being is, some people might think they're ready for that, but because of when they start encountering their true self, their real self, fear bubbles to the surface along with their insecurities. They start to tap into things they never thought that they would tap into. And they might classify that, unfortunately, as something evil. I've heard people classify, well, that's why I left, because I started encountering spirits and demons. And well, they can become spirits and demons if you don't, on a religious level, if you interpret them that way. Because they never get past the struggle. They never get past dealing with the conflict and personal issues, so they label it as something negative, and they have this epiphany that they needed to be saved, and then they go back to being more spooky than they used to be. Look, when you're dealing with what we call your real self, your shadow self, whatever you want to call it, whatever term you need to give it. Okay, as you heard me saying over the last several weeks, and what we're going to get ready to get into with the saber mind and things of that nature, you've heard me say over the last several weeks, it's not always a pleasant thing. And I want to make that crystal clear. I never said it was a pleasant thing. And anybody that presents it as such obviously doesn't know what the fuck that they're talking about. Alright? So it's important that we make that crystal clear, and it's important that people understand that, because look, if you think, and I would assume people that are on this path don't think that, but maybe you're new and maybe you're still finding your way, so I kind of want to speak to that real quick. There will be hardships, there will be struggles, there will be difficulties. You will encounter shit that you've never encountered before imaginable. And I'm not saying that to scare people if you're new. I'm not saying that to just not to be not encouraging, or to be, if you want to label it negative, but I don't want to sugarcoat it and bullshit, because anybody that presents it, because the problem is, I'm saying that because I think some people think they're going to escape on this path and it's just going to alleviate all of their problems. They think it's an escape and it's a quick fix, and it's not, because it's actually going to be more intense, it's actually going to be more internal, and you're probably going to deal with shit you ain't never dealt with before. And as I've said always, you've heard me say on many videos in the past, it always, that beginning stage is always the roughest. Okay? That beginning, area, or we're going to say the first 6 months to a year of your path, you always hear people, and I always get this feedback, you always hear people talk about this isolation aspect, this loneliness, I hear people term it, right? And it's a struggle for some people, because they don't, they're not sure how to put this into its correct perspective. And to some, it becomes a tough thing to overcome. To some, it becomes a tough thing to work through. And I'll be honest with you, some people, a lot of people that I've known over the years, tend not to get through it, and they turn back and go what they're doing, because there is a moment where you break that barrier, where you break that normal cycle of doing things, that methodology of being indoctrinated, of you start seeing things, your very fabric of your existence is tested. Everything you stood for, everything you thought was a reality and a truth, is tested and questioned on this path. And that's why most people can't hang, or the idiots that talk about it and don't know nothing about it, is because of their insecurities, and they feel like they need to stay safe in a dogma that makes them feel comfortable, not outside of their comfort zone. And I see a lot, And a lot of people have done that who, quote unquote, consider themselves conscious. They left one religion and they just jumped right into another one called Comedicism or Ephaism or whatever the fuck you want to call it. This is a reality. And this is where the struggle comes in. So that fall of Lucifer, Satan, the adversary, all those stories that connect to it, the Cain and Abel story, right? All of these different things that you see recorded in these mythologies represent that internal struggle. That battle that you face on a daily basis to enforce your will, right? Because you're constantly struggling to enforce your will, right? And magic is about what? Working greater black magic is about enforcing your will to bring a greater change. Well, look at how you have to work that magic on a daily level every day in your life. It's unavoidable. And again, as I said, it starts with simplistic shit. Sometimes we're looking for all of these deep, intricate things on this path. We make shit more complicated than it actually is. And sometimes we think to make effective change that we always got to do this long, drawn-out, elaborate ritual. And now, I'll make this clear. There are times when that is necessary, no doubt. There are intense workings one must do sometimes that need that type of approach. But magic on a daily basis is getting your life in order and under control. Or as we like to say, making order out of your chaos. It starts with the simple things, organizing your day, planning what you need to accomplish. If you're a family or career person, work a job, whatever it is, approaching it with a sharp mind and mentality of how you can be the best and successful at it so it opens doors to bigger and better things. And I said this on a video a few days back or last week. I don't give a shit if you flip hamburgers, but you be the best hamburger flipper because in your approach tells everything, one, about yourself and the results you're going to get. Because you will have a miserable existence. You might be a person, as I said a few days ago in that same video, I believe. You might be a person that is in a place in their life right now and they're not satisfied. And that's okay. That's human nature. That's being a human. But if you approach it with that same miserable mindset, nothing will ever change for you. I can guarantee you. If you approach it with the mindset and constantly think, I'm going to make a change of this and formulate a plan. I'm going to make a better aspect of myself in this life and start approaching whatever it is you can't stand to do with the right attitude and be the best at it. That's magic in itself, people. That's deconstruction and reconstruction aspect of magic in itself. It's a tough thing to master and totally perfect something you can't stand, be it a philosophy, a doctrine, a craft. It's not a challenge if you are constantly the best at the same thing you do over and over. That would be fucking boring. We all know that. But I'm trying to show you on a daily basis how the power of the mind, mental magic, is utilized throughout the course of your entire day. Right? Just a very simple fact. Look, I used the example of being in the gym and exercising earlier. But I work a form of magic of managing my time. When I'm in the gym, I'm also utilizing that same time to study and grow. Whether it's the type of music I'm listening to tap into a certain vibration and frequency, to open me up, to receive messages. And then my mind will be focused, for an example, on something today that caught my attention at the corner of my eye. As I'm scanning the screens to the left, I look. You can even make your exercise routine magic and ritualistic. Because you can do visualizations when you're doing reps on certain parts of the weight machines. If you're working your chest, I know it might sound crazy, but you can do, chakra work and visualizations while you're in the gym exercising. Being on a cardio machine, right? You can master rhythmic breathing. Because if you get on a cardio machine and you're constantly out of breath, well, I'm going to tell you, that's a telltale sign that you are a mouth breather. You might want to either record yourself sleeping or have somebody do it for you. And you probably snore a lot. I'm sure we all snore. My wife, I've had her record me. And there's periods where I snore because I want to see my breathing patterns when I sleep. If your wind is bad, it's a telltale sign you're a mouth breather. I bring that up because you can practice breath control and master the science of that breath control while doing any type of cardio exercise, low intensity, mid intensity, high intensity, because when you practice rhythmic breathing via visualization, it gets one of the reasons why a lot of people are disconnected. I mean, that's something for a whole nother time. I'm just going to get into the basics of it. Is because their rhythmic breathing is out of whack, right? One thing I learned in the Rosicrucian order, they do something called experiments on a regular basis, intoning what they call vowel sounds via breathing methods, and they connect the breath into spiritual vibrations and frequencies via mantras and chants, and most importantly, tones. Right? And when we do something called a convocation, there is certain things done in those convocations, if you're a Rosicrucian, you know what I'm talking about, that incite those frequencies and vibrations so you resonate with it. And it is a very healing. When I say healing in the sense, it opens your senses up. It creates a certain level of energy that you may not know or be familiar with consistently that you have. So just by doing something simple like that, I'm trying to give you examples to show how you can, one, ritualize or work magic on an everyday basis. But I want to make it clear, it starts with just your everyday life, your everyday routine, your everyday task. From the moment the feet hit the floor when you come out of the bed, the war starts. You get out of the bed, you start facing the wall with, what am I going to wear? You go in your closet, you start figuring out, I'm going to wear this goes with this, I'm going to wear these pair of shoes or sneakers today. The mind already begins at war, and it only recharges itself when it goes into the astral realm at night, or the state of slumber or sleep, as some falsely call it, right? When you understand this cycle, for lack of a better word, when you understand this whole process and then you can apply it to your everyday life and work magic, that's when things really start to change. So it's not just about going to your altar, your chamber room. It's not just about reading a book and regurgitating some fucking information, thinking you've mastered it, because all that is for naught if you can't apply the shit, right? And all of this comes from, again, back to the original point, this fall of Lucifer. That was, again, as I've been saying many times, that was when your fall in that story represented your rising and coming to the awareness of who you really are. Because you struggled with conformity. It's not in our nature to be a conformist. It's not our nature to be a follower. It's not our nature to be a dick rider and suck other people's dicks and do what everybody else is doing and copy what everybody else is doing. That's what conformist, simple-minded people do that really by nature are not gods or goddesses. All they basically are is conformists, dick riders, and followers. That's all they are. So don't be deceived by that shit. And we are not supposed to be that on this path. I want to make that clear. All right? So hopefully that helps. But anyway, before I go, that's it.